in session already. We had a closed session just before this, so we're going to move forward with our meetings. First, I'd like to go ahead and stand. We're going to do Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have any additions or deletions anybody wants to put on the agenda? Hearing none. Okay, move forward. I need approval or a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting from the April 23rd session.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? See none. Minutes are approved. And we're going to move on to the appeal at hand. And forgive me if I say this name wrong. I apologize up front. We're moving on to appeal number 24-004 with Yochannon Polter, Tzadok Eliyahu. Am I pronouncing that right? All right, thank you. The Fresh Start Center, 23800 Northwestern Highway, Suite 110, Southfield, Michigan, 48075, has requested a public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a dimensional variance from the requirements set forth in Section 3.3C of the zoning ordinance here within. Mr. Borden, if you will, please.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We are here this evening for dimensional variance request from the Fresh Start Center. Subject site is located at 232A5 Meridian. It is, if you can see the cursor on your screens, it's this guy right here, southeast corner, Meridian and Ferry. The site and most of the surrounding area, including the residences, are all zoned R1B, which is a single-family zoning designation. Few of the pertinent ordinance standards for your consideration this evening. You've already referenced 3.3C, which requires 40-foot setbacks from all lot lines. This particular building does not meet that from the Meridian Road front lot line or the southerly side lot line. 22.2P, which is part of the special land use review process, dictates that anytime a special land use also needs a variance, that it has to go through Planning Commission for a recommendation to the ZBA, and that the ZBA has to then act on the variances before the Planning Commission can put forth the recommendation on the special land use. And then lastly, the one that you all are actually most familiar with is 23.5B, which are your dimensional variance review criteria. So this is a look at the site plan that was originally submitted. So you can see here the existing building, and then property line is this one bolded out here. You can see it along here. And as I mentioned, the existing building does have deficient setbacks from the 40-foot requirement along Meridian front lot line. It's about a 38-foot setback provided. And then the southerly side lot line, which is about a 2-foot setback provided. And again, if I know the white on white probably doesn't help, but if you can see the cursor, this is the area in general that we're talking about. So those are the two items before you. This has had a bit of a review process behind it and still has some steps ahead of it. So I wanted to make sure I provided the ZBA with a decent summary. Most of this is in my review letters. Some of this has been already presented to Planning Commission at their last meeting, but I think it's important for you all to understand where we've been, how we got here, where we still need to go. So at their March 20th meeting, the Planning Commission did review the special land use and site plan request. They conducted the required public hearing. Ultimately, they decided to postpone their action or table the request to their May 6th meeting, which was intended to allow the petitioner the opportunity to compile their variance application form and submittal materials. Planning Commission then met again on May 6th. They did ultimately put forth a recommendation to the ZBA to deny the variance request based on a finding that the test for practical difficulty had not been met. So as part of your part of the packets that were presented to you, I think you did have a sample, or not a sample, but you had a draft meeting minutes of the Planning Commission's action from that May 6th meeting, recommending to the ZBA that they deny, that you all deny the variance request. And again, that's a procedural item under your zoning ordinance. I mentioned earlier, section 22.2. So here we are tonight, May 28th. Planning Commission, Zoning Board. I forgot what meeting I was at. Too many meetings, folks. Zoning Board of Appeals. So you're here tonight to give consideration to the variance request. It does require that you conduct a formal public hearing. And if you are so inclined this evening, you are in position after the close of that hearing to put forth your decision on the variance request. Pending action this evening, we do tentatively have a June 3rd, which is just next Monday, very quick turnaround, but we do tentatively have a Planning Commission meeting scheduled. We have another case, so I think we'll have the meeting either way. But if you put forth your action tonight, then this will go back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration of the special use and site plan with your action on the variances as part of that consideration. Procedurally, the special land use goes through Planning Commission and then onto the Township Board for a final determination. However, the site plan is something that procedurally is in the hands of the Planning Commission. So Planning Commission will have the opportunity at that upcoming meeting, be it June 3rd, be it a different meeting, to put forth recommendation on the special use and potentially act on the site plan as well. Your ordinance does give the commission the ability to postpone or defer action on the site plan until such time as the Township Board has acted on the special use. So that will be up to the Planning Commission and whatever their determination is. And then lastly, potentially, and I think I got the date right this time, Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, tentatively, there's the chance that June 24, this could be in front of the Township Board. So all of that, again, every step in the process is determined by the one that precedes it. So an action tonight will then get us in front of the commission for the next meeting. An action by the commission will then take this to the board at a subsequent meeting. So there are still a couple of steps yet remaining in this overall process. So this is a snapshot from my review letter, because I wanted to just give you, again, a quick overview. Some of this is a bit redundant, but I do think it's important information. So section 3.3C, paragraph 2B is where the requirement for the 40-foot setback for principal structures comes from. As we've already noted, we have 38 from meridian front. We have 2 feet from the southerly side. So those are essentially the 2 variances that are being sought. So the first is related to the meridian front setback, which is deficient. The second is related to the side yard setback, which is also deficient. Similar to the slide I just showed you, there are still remaining steps, so it would be my suggestion that if you're going to consider favorable action on the variance request this evening, I would encourage you to include a couple of conditions. One would be that the Township Board approves the special land use, and 2 would be that the Planning Commission approves the site plan. So that way, variance approval, special use approval, and site plan approval are essentially all linked together so that we don't get one without the other. And then this slide, this is one I presented to Planning Commission last month. We do have a new member, a couple of newer members, and I have not been able to get to your ZBA training, so I thought this was a good opportunity to steal a slide from that, remind you of this key principle here. So this is also outlined in my review letter to a degree, but the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act refers to practical difficulty as the test that is necessary for granting of a dimensional or a non-use variance. However, that phrase is not defined in the Act. As such, the principles that comprise practical difficulty have been derived from the courts, and there are 4 key considerations. The first being that strict compliance with the standard would unreasonably prevent the landowner from using the property for a permitted purpose or would render conformity unnecessarily burdensome. That the particular request or a lesser relaxation of the ordinance standard would provide substantial justice to the landowner and neighbors. that the plight is due to unique circumstances of the property and is not shared by neighboring properties in the same zoning district. And lastly, that the problem has not been self-created. Really important to remind you and note that in order to demonstrate practical difficulty, all 4 of those points have to be met. If 3 of them are met, then the test for practical difficulty is not met. So all 4 of those points have to be met. Now, how do those relate to your own zoning ordinance? Funny you should ask. I have a slide for that. So 23.5B, you all do have 14 review considerations for non-use or dimensional variances. I have highlighted 1, 2, and 4, which are essentially the same as what I just presented to you. So those 4 key principles of practical difficulty are found in your ordinance. You also have basically 11 others that are relatable, but in my opinion are somewhat secondary. So if, again, in order to demonstrate practical difficulty, at a minimum 1, 2, and 4 have to be met and present. So if some of these others are present, but not 1, 2, and/or 4, then the variance should not be approved. If all of these are met, then the variance should be approved. So I think it's just important to relay that again. Certainly I can come back to this at any point in time. These are just direct excerpts right from your zoning ordinance. So this is the full language as noted in the ordinance. And then this is the remainder of the 14 standards, which I'm about to cover again. So I did present you with a review letter with my opinions and an understanding of the process, some of the background points. So some of my findings, so first related to practical difficulty. So in my opinion, strict compliance with the ordinance will not prevent use of the property for a permitted purpose in this particular instance. The owner applicant is allowed to continue use of the property as a single-family residence, which is the reason, as stated by the petitioner, it was originally purchased. There are also other uses that would be allowable in R1B zoning that the petitioner could pursue that would not result in the need for variances. With respect to substantial justice, the extent of the variances are based on existing property conditions. So we've already kind of showed you that. So these are existing conditions. These are not conditions they are proposing. They have inherited these with their purchase of the property. However, I don't think it's been fully demonstrated that variances would grant substantial justice to other owners in the district. And if you'll recall, the key principle is not only the landowner or applicant in this case, but also to neighbors and/or surrounding property owners. Similar to my point under practical difficulty, the property can continue to be used as a single-family residence. There are also other R1B uses that could be pursued without the need for variance. With respect to public safety and welfare, so this is where I did my original presentation to the commission back in March, was very lengthy, and I believe you all have a copy of my review letter in your packet. So in order to kind of minimize the length of my ZBA letter, there are a lot of references back and forth, which I tried to forewarn you about. So I do apologize for making you read multiple letters from me. I know I can get a little wordy, but I appreciate you taking the time to go through everything. So with respect to this particular standard and several others I'm about to hit upon, I did put forth some suggestions where I think there's some operational conditions that the petitioner should be held to as part of the special land use review process to ensure that not only the special use standards are met, which the commission will consider at a future meeting, but also as it relates to several of these variance standards. So I think public safety and welfare is one of them. I'm going to have a couple more times, I'm going to repeat that same statement. With respect to extraordinary circumstances, this property is a conforming R1B lot. It actually exceeds minimum lot width and area requirements. It is also relatively regular in shape. I do not see any discernible extraordinary conditions or circumstances of this particular property. It's a corner lot. Corner lots are all over the place. It's a waterfront lot. Waterfront lots are all over this community. So there really isn't anything, in my opinion, particularly unique about the property itself. Back to this. With respect to property rights, similar to a lot of the points I've already stated, variances are not necessary to use the property for a permitted purpose. Safety hazard, same as I mentioned for public safety and welfare. I do have some suggestions for operational conditions as part of the special land use process that I think are going to be necessary to help uphold that standard. With respect to land values, there really hasn't been any evidence presented either way. I don't know that this will be beneficial. I don't know that this will be detrimental in terms of land values. There really hasn't been any information either way with respect to that particular standard. Neighborhood character is another one where, again, in my planning commission review letter, I did put forth a suggestion of a number of operational conditions that I think are needed as part of that special use process. Light and air, so the deficient setbacks are existing conditions, so the supply of light and air is already established. This will not have any further impact as it relates to adjacent properties and their access to adequate light and air. Orderly development pattern, this is another one where I think there are conditions that are needed as part of the special land use process to ensure that that standard is met. The petitioner, as part of their overall request, there is a limitation they have placed on the number of attendees as well as the number of staff. That maximum in total is 8 people at any given time on this property. Given that limitation, I don't believe that upwards of 8 people on that property are going to have detrimental impacts on traffic flow and or pedestrian safety in the area. Nuisance impacts, impact on adjacent properties, and relationship to adjacent land uses. These all fall under that same category where I've put forth suggestions for some operational conditions that the Planning Commission and ultimately the board will have to consider. But I do think those are necessary to, one, demonstrate compliance with the special use standards, but also then, two, in this particular instance, I think those are necessary to demonstrate compliance with many of these zoning board of appeals review standards as well. I think that's it, Mr. Chair. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that any of you may have, or we'll let you know petitioner's representative is here this evening as well.
All right. Does anybody on the board have any questions to Mr. Borden at this point in time? Anybody to my left? No, anybody to my right? Okay, you're all set for now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Probably
I'll stick around.
Don't leave. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward with the petitioner. If you like, go and present your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening to the members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to come present before you this evening. My name is Larry Opaleski. I do represent the Fresh Start Center in regards to this application. I have been here a number of times over the past few months, but this is my first time in front of this board, so it's very nice to meet you all. And I will make my remarks tonight assuming that you have all read the correspondence that has been submitted and have all had the chance to review that and consider that. So I'm not going to go through all 14 points of your ordinance. I think those have been addressed in the record. What I do want to do is just kind of give some brief comments, give an overview of what the proposed use is, just hit a couple points, and then if you have any questions for me at that time, I'd be happy to answer those to the best of my ability. As you know, we're here before you tonight requesting setback variances. As Mr. Borden mentioned, the Fresh Start Center hosts small, quiet Jewish retreats no more than twice per month at the property. And the building, which is non-conforming for the setbacks, is pre-existing and was not constructed by the Fresh Start Center. I want to, since I'm just kind of giving an overview of the use, I want to just emphasize what this is not. There have been some comments made in the past, and there may be comments made this evening on these points, so I figured might as well just address these up front. There have been some rumors and statements made that this is some sort of medical care facility. This is demonstrably false. It is not a medical care facility. The state has already looked into this and has issued its findings, which the township has, that there is no personal care, protection, or supervision being provided to the attendees. Again, I know you as board members, you know what you're doing here. You know that land use decisions have to be made based on evidence. And the evidence on this point from the state of Michigan is that this is not a medical facility. This is, however, a place where religious gatherings are conducted. The fact that some may not understand or necessarily agree with the nature of the religious exercise does not make it any less legitimate. Certainly in the eyes of federal law, and I'm speaking of the Religious Land Use Act here, which I have addressed in my correspondence and which I won't take the time to go over all the way now. Secondly, there's been statements made that this is a business that's just out to make a profit, and is that using the religious use as some sort of ruse, I suppose you could say. Again, the federal government, the IRS, has looked at this organization and has qualified it as a charitable 501c3 tax-exempt organization. As such, by definition, it is not a business. It's just simply not the case. Again, I know these are not necessarily land use factors, but these are things that we've had to address in the past, so I figured I'd get out in front of them for you here this evening. In regards to the actual factors for the setback variances, again, Mr. Borden did a great job, as he always does, going through your ordinance requirements. I would disagree as to whether or not those are met here. In terms of practical difficulty, I mean, without these variances, this property can never be used for religious gatherings. Your ordinance requires 40-foot setbacks for any property that's going to be used for people to gather for a religious purpose. The way that this building is constructed, either that's never going to be possible without these variances, or this building would have to be completely demoed and rebuilt in a manner that would conform with those setbacks. Now, to me, that's a practical difficulty. I've been doing this for quite some time, as I'm sure many of you have as well, and reasonable minds can disagree on some of these points at times, but again, for me, if we're saying that this either has to be demoed and rebuilt, an pre-existing building, or it can never be used for religious purposes, to me, that's a practical difficulty. And again, this was not a building that was constructed by the Jewish Fresh Start Center. It was pre-existing and at one time or other approved by the township. Granting variances would do substantial justice both to the Fresh Start Center and to neighbors. In terms of actual adjacent neighbors, we only have one. That is Mr. Reaver, who occupies the building to the south. He is here this evening. The Fresh Start Center has done its best to maintain neighborly relations with Mr. Reaver. It's our belief that he will not express opposition. Of course, I'll let him speak for himself, but again, he's the one that to be most impacted by these variances. And if he's not in opposition, again, I'm in front of a lot of these boards, and usually that carries a lot of weight in these sort of decisions. Forcing a tear down and rebuild of this property would not do substantial justice, and it would be a great inconvenience both to Mr. Reaver and, of course, to the Fresh Start Center itself. Also, in terms of substantial justice, there are, and again, I've made this point previously, there are several adult foster care facilities located in residential neighborhoods on the island. They are not subject to these 40-foot setbacks. And of course, those are facilities that do cater to residents that do struggle with mental health issues and things like that, which is a more intensive use than what's being proposed here. And to propose stricter requirements on a less intensive use, to me, in my line of work, that's not substantial justice. We do have unique circumstances in regards to the property itself. Mr. Borden is correct in that it's a fairly regularly shaped property. It is a corner lot. However, you can see on the right there that a good portion of this property is unusable FEMA floodplain and wetland. That does cut in quite a bit to the buildability area and the usability. And again, in terms of what is unique to this property, again, it's got a non-conforming building on it that was pre-existing. We have not been alerted of any nuisance impacts that would be generated from this use. Again, it's very quiet. It's no more than twice per month, so majority of the time it's dead silent. There's nothing going on there. These are the great majority of the activities take place indoors. There's no noise enhancements. There's no dust, fumes, anything else that would typically raise nuisance concerns in a land use context. Mr. Borden did mention operational limitations and conditions. The discussions that we've had with the township on those points have been positive. I don't think we've pushed back on any of those. I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong on that, but we've been more than willing to engage in those conversations and to be good neighbors. Finally, I did take the opportunity to kind of, since I had never met you folks before, kind of look back and see how these variances are normally handled. So from 21 to 24, 23 out of 30 variances were granted before this board, many of which were far greater than what's being requested here today. 23 out of 30, that's a pretty good batting average for ZBA. And to me, that says this is a board that respects private property rights. And I can appreciate that as both as a professional and as someone who considers that important. So what I would tell you is we're not requesting anything that's not in front of this board generally and is not granted generally. Again, all we're looking to do is use the existing building. We still have a long way to go through this process. So with that, I'll answer any questions or I'll get out of your way so you can have your public hearing.
So I have a couple, I guess, comments or questions.
Yes, sir.
First of all, going to what you were stating about other variances being approved, not approved, that really has no bearing on this particular session today.
Oh, I agree. There's a lot of noise in those numbers.
Right, I mean, everything's done on an independent basis, right? So,
Sure.
I mean, we could list everything for the last 10 years if you want to go back and forth, what was approved, not approved. So that's going to have zero bearing on today's meeting, right? But I do want to ask, originally, I just want to clarify. The house was originally purchased as a vacation home, is that correct?
Yes.
And they were there for 6 months or so, as I recall? Maybe 7, and then wanted to turn it into this retreat, is that correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay, and now they're not trying to make this into adult foster care facility, because you brought that up as well. They're trying to make this a church, correct? 501c3?
So the way that your ordinance defines church, it's any structure where people gather for religious purposes. So under the ordinance definition, yes, it's a church, but it's not a church in the sense of what you and I might typically think of a church, where people gather on Sundays or Wednesdays or whatever for services.
So can you clarify what you mean, or I guess maybe you can help with the ordinance as far as religious purposes?
Yes, absolutely. So as we've stated in our written correspondence, this is a place where members of the Jewish faith will gather no more than twice per month. They have these retreats where there's discussions, there's group prayer sessions, there's meals shared. These are individuals that are seeking to reconnect with the Jewish faith through these group sessions.
Okay, so people just coming back and forth, having, I guess, a Bible study, if you will, whatever the case may be. That's not what's being presented tonight, though. What's being presented tonight, like if this home was purchased originally to be a church, and you went through the right channels to make it a church, you would have found out early on that this could not be permitted in that particular zone, correct?
Can you rephrase that
Yes,
question?
I sure
I'm not
can.
sure I
So-
understand.
When you originally purchased the property, if it was originally purchased with the intent in mind to create a religious facility out of this, a church, then going through the proper channels to create that church, or make that property a church, we would have come across all the ordinances we have in front of us right now, the zoning difficulties we have in front of us right now, and it would have been told then, or I guess your organization would have known then, that we can't permit this to be a church in a residential district. Because we do have other property in the island that can be used as a church facility, I mean, in other districts. It's just not this particular district.
If
But
every residential or every religious property on the island is either zoned residential or is adjacent to residential. So I'm not trying to.
no, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, to follow up on that then, are those in compliance? I would eventually say they are in compliance, but I haven't looked at each one of them, so I can't say for certain. Did you look at any of those?
In terms of,
The facilities we have on the island are 501c3.
I have not looked at all the ones that are 501c3. I have looked at the zoning for the religious organizations that are located on the island, and many of them are the exact same R1B that this property is. And I believe, and don't quote me if I'm wrong on this, but I might be off by one, but I believe every single one of them is adjacent to at least some residential.
Was that in your, 'cause I don't remember seeing that in your letter. Was that in your letter? All these different organizations? Or no?
I've sent a few different letters, so.
Right, 'cause I remember, I did read your letter.
Sure,
In
yeah.
detail, and I don't
Correct.
recall that, so that's why I'm asking. Because I'd like to know which examples you're referring to.
Yeah, we can certainly supplement with that. I mean, that would not be a problem for us to do.
But
That's-
in front of us right now, we
Correct.
don't have that. There's no other examples of it. This home was originally purchased as a residential vacation home, and now it's being asked of the township to make it a 501c3 church. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
The primary use would be as a religious gathering facility. Yes, that's correct.
Under a 501c3? I mean, is that, I'm trying to clarify for myself.
The organization is a 501c3, yes.
And that's, herein lies the problem, that 501c3 doesn't fit in this particular zoning, correct? And that's why we're all here. I mean, am I correct with that?
Well, I think so the problem with that line of reasoning is that churches are permitted in residential zones. It's not a unpermitted use, it's a special use. And the reason they need a variance is because they don't have the usual setback that other churches are required to have within the R1B zoning district.
Okay, that's going back to what I said earlier then. If
So-
that's what this was gonna be originally, we would have known, then we wouldn't be in front of us today. Perhaps.
Well, we would have had to ask for it either way, but
Right.
I understand the point you're making.
All right, I don't mean to take up all your time. Anybody else on the board have any questions? I'll start with my left.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I just.
Go ahead, yes,
real-
go ahead,
real
I'm sorry.
briefly.
Yeah, yeah.
My April 16th correspondence to the board did make mention of the fact that there are at least 5 other churches that are either zoned residential or located directly adjacent to, and I did name those in there as well.
Okay.
So, since
Okay.
you asked.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. To my left, I'm gonna start with Mr. Schweiker. Do you have anything for Mr. Obleski?
Questions?
Questions?
No questions.
What-
Mr. Opaleski, when did your clients purchase the residential property? Do you know?
2020.
You know when in 2020?
I believe August.
And when did Fresh Start Center incorporate? Do you know that?
When did they incorporate as a entity?
Correct.
That I'm not certain of, but easily get that to you.
That's on the State of Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs for corporations, correct?
Yes.
Would you disagree with that date of incorporation being November 23rd, 2020?
I would not. I have no reason to.
All right, there's no need to get me that information. That's the only 2 questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have
Mr.
no
Yeager?
questions.
I have a question. Are there any other Fresh Starts in operation with this particular model, whether in the community or outside?
I am not aware of any. Last time we were asked this question, the answer was no. I'm not aware of any plans for any other ones. Certainly not in Grosse Ile. I am not aware of any other centers that are currently in operation.
Okay, and have there been any safety concerns raised, and if so, how many?
Raised by,
Whether the citizens or the participants?
well, there have been many comments made by residents throughout these various hearings. The one that is brought up is, and I actually had it with me last time, there was a young lady who was walked away from one of the retreats at one point, walked into someone's backyard. That individual called the police. The police helped her get back to the center, at which point they had a vehicle for her to take her, I believe it was to her sister's house. And the whole thing was 30 minutes or less.
Okay, you guys do not have a document, or you don't document the incidents as they occur? Or how does it work when you have a safety issue?
There have been no other
Okay, that's
safety
it.
issues.
And to be clear, the residents aren't, I don't even know if residents is the right word. They're not, it's not like inpatient treatment, right? The lady that left is perfectly free to leave
Right.
and move about freely, right? So,
It's just like if one of us was to walk into a traditional Christian church, we're not kept there. We're free
Right.
to walk
Okay.
off the property and go wherever we want.
okay.
Or same as a residential home.
We have any other questions from the board? From Mr. Obolewski? Seeing none, hearing none, okay. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your
We may
time.
call you back up, though, if you're open to that, okay. Okay, we're gonna move on to public comments, but before we do, I just want to mention a few things. The speakers are to give their name and address slowly so we can identify you and your property for the record of statements. Please use the handle of the microphone that's out there, or get as close to the one that's to the computer screen if you can, and we can adjust that podium to your height if we need to. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes apiece. All comments must be directed to the chair, which would be me. There'll be no direct dialogue between the applicant, the planner, or ZBA members from the audience, and vice versa. We'll go all back and forth through me, okay? All comments must be issue-focused. Okay, so religious or racial slurs are not going to be tolerated, and we'll ask you to leave at that point. Concerns and questions will be collected and addressed by the planner. I will go around the room. I'm going to start with my left and go to the right. That's how I'm going to do with the questions. So anybody has a question, raise your hand. We'll go from left to right to get through everything. I want to make sure we don't miss anybody. And we want everybody to wait until the speaker's done before they start bringing up any other issues, or don't interrupt anybody, please. Everybody has a chance to say what they need to say or what they want to say. We're just asking you to keep it on point with the issue at hand. Finally, you may hear the opinions of the applicant, which we already heard. You may agree or disagree with them. In either case, please show respect for all speakers and the applicant and the ZBA by staying quiet in the audience while other people are speaking. Everyone has the right to be heard, okay? Does anybody on the left side of the room here have any comments they want to come up and make from the public? Anybody in my third section over here? No. Anybody from the center section, which I will stand up, I see a hand.
Gentleman there.
Sir, come on up, please. Hello?
Thank you, Chair. My name is James Johnson, 9482 Waterman Drive. My comments will be very short. First of all, I have no qualm about any group who wishes to help anyone in any way. What I do have a concern about is that the folks who own the house, when looking up their businesses, because these two gentlemen are businessmen, I just don't find, I have a hard time believing they came to Grosse Ile as a vacation home. This is a community of homeowners. I don't personally know of anybody else who has a vacation home here. This is their primary residence. The second part that I have is that to think that they bought this home and then the group incorporates a month later and they're getting income, rental income from the Fresh Start, I just find that hard to believe it happened, oh, let's just do this. That's my only concern. Thank you for allowing me time to speak.
Yes, sir, thank you. Anybody else from the center section? Ma'am, please come on up. Yep, thank you. Hey, Ross, you had the time, right?
Thanks. My name is Michelle DeJulian, and I live at 7761 Ferry Road. So I am a neighbor to this home and live right on this block. It frightens me when I go by the home and see that the retreats are running. because there are kids playing on the bridge, they're fishing, they're riding their bikes, the bike path is in front of the house, and this is a residential neighborhood. I'm here tonight, though, because I am a licensed mental health practitioner in the state of Michigan. I'm the vice president on a board for Michigan School Social Workers and Psychologists in the state of Michigan, and an executive committee member to the Special Education Advisory Committee to the state of Michigan. I am familiar with the Fresh Start program and the clinical staff that work there, and they are not listed as a medical facility for the state of Michigan because they are unlicensed as a facility. So what that means is when you are a professional, you have a professional license with certification that you have to keep up and attest to in a certain amount of time with continuing education credits. And where you practice, the venue you practice at must also be licensed with the state of Michigan and attested to every 90 days that you have certified staff that you say are working there, the address, the contact information, all of that, in order to be billable for insurances, and that is all set up for the safety of the people who are participating in that program. I have personal knowledge of this program because I assisted one of my patients within the last 7 months to try to determine if this was an appropriate program for them, not knowing what it was at the time. It is it's a week-long mental health program for people who have suffered from anxiety, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, sexual dysfunction, depression, and probably other disorders. At the time when I assisted my patient, the fee was $11,000 a week. They have a program where people can sponsor patients to attend, or participants, whatever we want to call them, that is now $13,000 a week or $6,500 for a half-a-week partial sponsorship because they don't take insurance. So when you don't take insurance, there's no mothership. There's no one overseeing what you're doing. There's no safety protocol set up in place. And so I am just absolutely so frightened about this program being here, not just in a residential neighborhood, but here at all in this community. And I feel that it's very unethical, and I just wanted to make sure that we're very transparent with what we're dealing with. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else from the center section here? Looks like I see a hand, but I can't see you around the podium. Please come on up. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, Michelle Bartlett, 8949 Voight. I have a lot of strong opinions about it, but I think it just comes down to a matter of law. Looking at the tests that you put up for the practical difficulty, they don't meet those prongs, right? And so, to me, it's just, a matter of law, and they may come back with a lawsuit later, and you want to make sure that you are following it verbatim. I don't see how you could approve it. I also think the reason that insurance doesn't pay for it is insurance will not pay for an unlicensed professional to give this kind of treatment. And I also think that this will impact the value of the homes of the people that live nearby. They bought these homes as vacation homes, and now they have somebody who, it's just my opinion, doesn't seem to be giving full disclosure on the truth. This thing about, we bought a vacation home, but within 3 to 6 months, we had a business up and running. You know what? I help clients. It takes longer than that to get something up and running. So I think you've asked some good questions. And again, I just think it's a matter of law that you couldn't approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the center section here? Saying none. Anybody from my right? Ma'am, come on up, please.
Hi, Margaret Shelton, Bellevue Road. So I've been to every meeting on this discussion, and I don't disagree with what was said. This is purely going to be a legal discussion, right? It's all about the legal checks and balances. But then I also listened to the mental health expert who spoke the last time, makes complete sense. So while I'm really clear that the decisions here will be based on legal principles, let's please be very clear Fresh Start began a business being disingenuous. It was purchased as a home and then turned into a retreat, if that's what we're going to call it, without any request or discussion with the township prior to that. I mean, if you changed from a home and you're going to a retreat, wouldn't you check into those things? Those should be red flags. Those are legal concerns. So the retreat began based on now changed. If you had looked at the social media and the website prior to when all of the legal discussions began, it was very different than it is now. There were discussions about ketamine, ketamine experts, and the use of it. And I've talked to friends who are physicians about this, just to help my own knowledge. Ketamine is not something that just anybody should be administering. You should not be left alone when doing this. And the young woman that went running from the home looking for help, I don't know if any of you were, I know some of you are on the planning commission. There was a young mother who showed up and was very distraught, very emotional, because her kids witnessed this. This shouldn't happen. I'm sorry. I do believe that the legal content is there for us to decline on both, but I'm up here asking again. We really need to, even after this is over and all said and done, we need to tighten some things up if this is how things can go. Because a young mother, any family, they shouldn't have to go through this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else to the right section over your third section? Anybody? No? Okay. I do have some letters that were submitted, 3. I'm not going to read them verbatim. They will be part of the public record. Anybody will have access to them after the meeting's done and published. What I will do is tell you who they are from. And after reading through these, all 3 are in opposition. And they all have what they feel are valid points. And again, you're all welcome to read through this later on. The first one was from Karen Cozy of 8135 Ferry Road. The next one is from James and Joanne Evangelista. The address is not, I'm sorry? You saw it up here?
Right there, it's in parentheses.
Oh, I'm sorry. 22883 Meridian. I apologize for that. It was buried in the paragraph. And I also have another one from Manhonda Perel Sandu from 23430 Lowry. Again, all these were in opposition, and they are going to be made public record. So you're all welcome to go ahead and look it up and read through them, okay? I'm going to direct this to the board at this point. I'd like to go ahead and focus on what we're looking at, which is going to be the 501c3 in a residential district. I'd like to hear comments. I'm sorry, did I say it properly?
The request before the board is related to a church, not necessarily that it's a 501c3.
I'm sorry, I
It's
made the
nature of the land use, not the nature
of the land use being a church,
the tax
which would be a
status.
501c3, which I apologize, I misstated on that.
And it's for 2 setback variants.
Setback variances. So I'm going to start to my left with Mr. Schweikert.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Being from the Planning Commission, we've had a lot of exposure to this particular application. We spent 3.5 hours with a public hearing under special land use at the first meeting, and another hour plus at a second meeting, where our goal was to make a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals based upon the 4 criteria that Brian laid out. The Planning Commission listened to the public. We listened to the comments and thoughts that Brian gave us. We listened to the applicant, and we factored all those into our recommendation. The recommendation was made that the Zoning Board of Appeals deny this particular application because it failed to meet all four of the practical difficulty criteria. The vote on that was unanimous. In my opinion, it was the right decision, the right recommendation, and I'm hoping that this ZBA will follow suit.
All set, sir? Sir? Ms. Kennedy?
I agree with Mr. Schweikert. I also listened to the previous meetings, and I concur with the decision that the Planning Commission came to, that we should deny this request.
I believe that the two variances being requested have not met the practical difficulty, substantial justice, or extraordinary circumstances, which are the three most important points for analyzing the request. So I too don't believe they have met the standards necessary to grant the request.
Okay. I'm along the same feeling with this particular issue with what's at hand. I don't feel like they've met the request made, the criteria they have to meet to be approved at this point. I would not be in favor of it myself. I'm going along here.
Well, we're not considering, the Zoning Board of Appeals is not considering whether this is a religious activity or not, or whether it's profitable, or whether it's a mental health care facility. All we're considering is the zoning ordinances and whether we would grant a variance for them. So I've sat on this board for almost 4 years now. I've always been very deferential to property owners' rights, and for me to change that today in the face of public upset would be would display a lack of integrity. So I will support these two variances.
Ma'am?
Well, I too have been on the board for a long time, but I think that the applicant has not shown any difficulty that isn't actually of their own making. So I don't support this.
Okay, One, I want to thank you all for doing the work of mental health, so that is definitely a plus. However, when looking at the land use, I have to deny it and concur with the Planning Commission.
With that said, do we have any other comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion?
Sir, make a motion.
The motion follows. The Zoning Board of Appeals moves to deny the request for two variances to the 40-foot setback requirement for churches in the R1B zoning district because the applicant has not established that there is a practical difficulty in literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance. Subpoint 1, strict compliance with the standard would not unreasonably prevent the landowner from using the property for a permitted use or would render conformity necessarily burdensome because it would not prevent the landowner from using the property for a permitted purpose, nor would it render a conformity unnecessarily burdensome. Second point, the particular request or a lesser relaxation of ordinance standards would not provide substantial justice to the landowner and neighbors because the standards apply evenly to similar properties, including the neighbors. Subpoint 3, the problem is self-created because the applicant knew or should have known that the setback standards for a church were not met when the decision was made to convert it from a single-family residence to a church. Those are the 3 points that I would like to have included in the motion.
Okay, I'll second the motion. Then we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Schweikert,
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy,
Aye.
Mr. Wono,
Aye.
I am an aye as well. Mr. Yeager,
Nay.
Ms. Davies,
Aye.
Polk,
Aye.
motion carries. We have nothing else on the agenda. Let's make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Any nays? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.